This is the 8-9 Combo.
This is the 8-9 Combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones. And, mate, the Lions have cracked back-to-back 50s on Australian soil. That's better than a lot of English cricket teams have done, I must say.
Yeah, it's nice to know that you're in this epicenter of rugby right now. Listen, I've been reading about the brain and the eyes. If there's one thing that can be very annoying is when people talk about pictures for the ref at scrum time. But it turns out that our brains really have to provide pictures for ourselves because when you think about it, they're just looking at something, it's bouncing back. There's nothing really picturey. They're not showing a movie inside your head. Your brain has to supply these things with some deduction and all kinds of inferences. And it even does something magical, which is going to frustrate all you guys in rugby forever. The brain, so 100 billion things like shoot through your brain into your eyes in 1 second. That's too much to handle in life. So your brain has to do some predictive stuff. So it provides images to you that haven't really happened yet, but they're based on, by the way, you don't have to wait till someone hits you in the head before you actually see it, right? It has to predict. And so
Are our brains using AI?
Yeah, they're the original AI. And so when referees sort of are a little bit too quick sometimes on the scrum picture, it's because they're already kind of thinking they know what they're about to see.
Yeah, they're seeing things that don't
Andrew
yet
Porter,
exist.
What's going to happen. You know that his bum will be in the wrong place. So that's just interesting to think about, that what's happening with the refs, seeing everything is kind of like how we all do. Let's just all be more gentle on calls missed and calls predicted.
What I'm hearing in this is that refs can see the future.
we all try to.
Yeah, we do. Here's cheers, mate. Let's rip straight in. What are we giving cheers to around the rugby world this weekend? I'm leading off.
Oh,
I'm leading off.
Go ahead.
Here you go. I'm leading off. Sorry, I've jumped the gun on this. I'm giving cheers to niche stats. And you're going to go, oh, yeah?
What's a niche? Give me an example of a niche
rugby stat. I'm going to give you a prime example of a niche rugby stat. Dan Sheehan scored the first try against the Western Force in Perth on Saturday night, right? That's all known, okay? Yeah. We know about that. So the first try of the tour on Australian soil was an absolute ripper from a Finn Russell cross kick. But it has also produced one of the great niche rugby stats. Dan Sheehan's try against the Western Force on Saturday night was the fastest ever try scored on Lions debut.
Interesting.
Overtaking, I hear you ask, Josh Lucy's try against the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand 2005. Lucy's try took 2 minutes 27. Dan Sheehan's 1 minute 35. So there you go. Someone has a list of the fastest tries scored by a player on Lions debut.
As the great Nishi philosopher said, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Niche stats. I don't know where to go with that niche. It's so niche.
I don't know. Who's the slowest try scorer on debut? Anyway.
It's going to be a prop. So my cheers is for the All Blacks and the Springboks, the All Blacks with their mysteriously hooped jerseys, it's claimed, allegedly, have moved Artie properly to 7. They have a big proper 8 now. They have a giant lock. They have Rico going to play wing where he belongs, allowing a proper 13. And it's a really nice looking team. Springboks have loaded up against Italy, 1,194 caps, 728 in the 15, 466 in the boom squad, and still brought in a debutant, Vincent Chituka, and then a 2-cap scrummy. It can be done. But I think these two great powers in rugby are they're paying homage to the fact that there is no friendlies in rugby, and this is test rugby, and they're giving their spectators in New Zealand and South Africa their money's worth.
It feels like New Zealand particularly have really made a point. All right, if you're going to send out your B or C squad, we are going big.
Yeah. And what's fun also, because of the Boks doing what they've done, you have Eben Etzebeth and Lourdes Diaga together, a very long partnership. You have Faf de Klerk the second half with Polly because it's a 6-2 bench. And then you have Damon Delende and Jesse Creel. That's a very long partnership.
Yep.
And, dare I say, cohesive.
I see what you've done there. I've got a bonus cheer for you.
Ooh.
A bonus cheer is for the 8-9 Tap and Go, which we launched earlier this week. And so keep an eye out on the 8-9 YouTube. It's exclusive it's properly exclusive, mate. It's not like one of these printed articles that are claimed to be exclusive and you can find it in 7 different places. It's only on our channel.
Exclusively all quoting each other's articles. Big circle jerk.
Exactly right. So out Tuesdays, roughly, little short, sharp. Go and check it out on our 8-9 page. 10 minutes, 3 questions. Really cool. I think it can work. I think it's got legs.
Yeah, and it's asymmetrical. It's 3 questions, so it's 2 in 1. I like that.
Yeah,
that appeals to my brain.
There you go. Ben Darwin is back for another great rugby chat in just a moment. But first, mate, I want you to tell the nice people why being an 8-9 subscriber will definitely make them taller.
Oh, yeah. It will make you taller because you'll reach higher. Your feet will still be on the ground, but you'll be stretched high in a never-ending contest for unlimited wants, for scarce resources. And we're in a giant game against all the other potters, and you can help us stretch high. You can lift us high. You are the wind beneath our wings. You are our hero.
Exactly right. Right. I'm going to use this as just the perfect ad hoc opportunity now. If you are watching us on YouTube, then just hit the red subscribe button down there in the bottom corner. And if you're listening on any of the pod platforms, Apple, Spotify, whatever it is, just hit subscribe, follow, like, whatever it is that you need to, and so that you don't miss an episode. The Lions are unbeaten on Australian soil on their 2025 tour, and with many questions to ask about their makeup on the bench and squad depth that would make a grown coach cry. So to help us try and make sense of it all from Gainline Analytics, it is wonderful to have back on the 8-9 combo, Ben Darwin. Hello, mate. Welcome back. How you going?
I'm well, thank you, Brett and Harry. How are you?
Good,
Very
man.
well.
Good to see you again.
Yes, I see what you've done there again. What have you made of the first 2 games of the Lions tour, Ben? Is it a special time for you ex-players? Do you automatically go back in our day mode?
There's a lot of blokes, including myself, putting their name out to get paid to go to lunches at the moment. That's the main thing we're all doing. Because there's a lot of lunches on. There's a lot of lunches. I reckon the Lions is like it's like Christmas. You'll probably gain 5 to 10 kilos over the period. And there's a lot of sort of bouncing around. So I went to Perth for the first one, which was really interesting. And then I'm going to go to most of them, I think.
Yeah,
so
cool.
Just doing whatever we're doing. So yeah,
nice, very good.
I like seeing your pictures on socials, Benny. You were like actually showing where the media types sit. You know, where the great unwashed like Brett sit, far from the madding crowd and with their laptops. So I'm fascinated by the shape of these lines because typically, whether it's been 2011, 2017, 2009, 17, 2023, very physical, brutalist, team that comes to the Southern Hemisphere and just says, I don't know if we can match speeds with you, but what we'll do is we'll just ram it down your throat. We'll stay close. Then maybe we'll steal one. We'll draw a series and so forth. In this one, either because they've decided we really have to work on our attack. I mean, it's preposterous to have 18 kicks by the Lions in a match like they did just now in Queensland. That's like a third of what the Crusaders did. Most teams winning finals nowadays are kicking 40 times. So do you think it's because they have to pull this attack together from disparate nations and they're just kind of saying, we're gonna try to keep ball in hand, or is this actually the way you think they're gonna try to play against the Wallabies?
So as usual, Harry, you've asked a question that could take 2 hours to answer. So the thing with kicking that I've always questioned is are teams kicking because they're winning, or are they winning because they kick?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ahead in a game, you'll generally kick to the corners. If you're behind, you'll play out of your own half. So whether there's a link between kicking and winning, or whether there's a link between winning and kicking and winning and versus the other way around, is always a question. But I don't disagree. Contestable kicks can be extremely effective. If you go to the size question, the larger the country, the more talent you have available, the more you'll have physical specimens. So we always said with Australian rugby, we tend to have good backlines because we don't have enough forwards of any size. So England being the biggest country, they'll have the biggest team because it's just more people available, so they can pick bigger people. Well, now we're a much bigger pool, which is the British and Irish Lions. They generally have a bigger pool of players even than England to choose from, obviously. So they tend to have physicality. So they'll tend to reflect on how they play, except this time they don't have the physicality because they're dominated maybe by the Irish, right, who will play in a different way. So I think that this will come to reflect, if you look at the coaching staff, it's almost entirely Irish. Someone said to me the other day, this is basically the Irish, it's their practice run for the 27 World Cup. Yeah. It just happens to bring other people along for it, for the fun. I don't, style of play is not something I'm big on because I'm interested in more how you can execute that style of play. But it will always be in the nature of the Lions to go with the physical size to use the specimens. And I was looking at Itoje last night comparative to his locking opposition. He's just a unit, physically. And why not use that?
Yeah. And didn't he have a game against Queensland, Harry? He was and timely because there was a few articles being written. We know Charlie Morgan wrote a piece because he initially said, am I a bit nuts about this, or is there something in it that is Itoje a guaranteed starter? And that was based on the performance of Big Joe McCarthy in Perth on Saturday night. And Itoje just comes out and brains it, thus adding to the selection headache.
It's interesting though because what you would think of Maro, a set piece lock, incredible line out operator, really powerful scrummager. On restart so clean. That's where the Lions have been quite shit, actually. They really have terrible restart so far. Their lineout has been wobbly, and their scrum has been really iffy against not good scrums. And, better are coming. So they've been living off this, 10 line break, 15 entries, 185 passes, and, trying to do wraparounds and pullbacks on every single play. Yeah. And it's been fine, So, I do wonder. I thought Maro might have read Charlie's article, and Charlie, to his credit, has been saying the headline made it seem more provocative than it was. It was a nice, sober, well-written article.
I liked Charlie's social post straight afterwards, quoting his own promotion of his own article, saying, "Nah, people will always forget about these things."
Maro's back.
Yeah, he was very, very good, Ben, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's fantastic. And I loved, if you just watch that last 2 minutes when they were going to have a scrum with, where they didn't have to take the penalty. They didn't have to take the scrum, but he decided to.
They could have kicked it to the corner and walked off.
Absolutely tearing into his pack, which was fantastic. They get that much voice that late in the game. I would be, as they would say, sucking seagulls at that point of the game. They have no voice whatsoever, but he's obviously setting the standards. And from our connections at Saracens, they've always talked about him being kind of like, yes, he's a alternative type of guy, but even from a very young age, he was a leader of men, and that all of his physical components were just off the charts. So it's just like something they'd never seen before in somebody so young. So it's now coming to the fore.
Yeah, it's setting things up. I mean, I'll be intrigued to see what sort of team they put out for New South Wales on Saturday night. The Waratahs put their team out, and it looks very, very, very standard, basically what we've seen this year for Super Rugby. Do you think we're going to see the closest marker to the Test team on Saturday night, or do we perhaps don't see that till next Wednesday against the ACT Brumbies?
I absolutely think they're going to give themselves that 10-day lead in with the Brumbies. I think the game against the Adelaide game, is that right? The ANZ is going to be the
AU-NZ Invitational game. Yeah,
that'll be the game. They definitely, everyone who's not playing in that restricted game. I originally had thought is that they were going to basically go, okay, if that's 10 weeks out, then we go 7 days before that, which would be this Reds game. But what threw it off is they couldn't put their best team against Argentina because none of them were available.
They didn't have half.
Yeah. So then they basically had to go, okay, well, whoever couldn't play in that game then plays against the Force. And now what it appears to be doing is they're working combinations in groups. So the front row, sort of the English-based front row, seems to be the backup front row. The Irish base seems to be the starting front row, and then you've obviously got the 9-10 combination. You couldn't get Itoje together with Chesham in that first game, so it's like they're just sort of rotating who they think are going to be the guys but in small portions. The areas where obviously it seems to matter the most is from our perspective, obviously the 1-2-3, the 4-5, the 9-10, the 10-12-13. But whether the problem is now they probably don't have enough time to build anything.
Yeah.
And so you don't find combinations, you build combinations, because if you put combinations against the quality of attack we have produced against them so far, which has been by its own nature chaotic, they're all sort of new combinations themselves. They haven't been tested. So what might happen is you say, okay, I'm going to throw a 12-13 together, and I'm going to put them against, let's use a Super Rugby version, the Drua or Moana, okay, or the Highlanders. No offense to any of those teams, they're just not great built at the moment. Well, that might work on that occasion, and then you play the Crusaders, and they get absolutely done.
Yeah.
And so just because a combination will work against a poorly constructed team doesn't mean it'll work against a well-constructed team. And the teams are going to get better and better, except for the obviously Adelaide Melbourne games. Not, the only time the Lions are probably going to come under any pressure is in the tests. So we will know then whether it works. What he has up his sleeve is he can always go back to Ireland in the way that Gatland went back to Wales in the third test last time, right? So we can go and if I may just digress for a second, what's really interesting with the Lions is there's two timelines taking place, right? So you get the seasonal timeline, which is they're 5 games in, we're going to be 1 game in, and then there's just the timelines of the overall cohesion of the team. If you look at Super Rugby and also the NRL, if a team has a lot of guys away through November, for example, or through the Rugby League World Cup, the players don't come back till like 2 weeks until the season starts, right?
Yes.
And so you get examples like the Crusaders lost to the Rebels a couple of years ago in round 1. They're at their weakest in round 1, and then they sort of get going as the season goes on. The Blues started pretty slow this year, probably for a long time.
For a long time, half the season.
Yeah, and so it takes time to get that back. So in this history of the Lions, the most likely game they've won so far in the modern era has actually been game 1, right? And they sort of caught us on the hop in that game 1. And then hopefully your sort of cohesion can take over. And then if, with a team like the Lions, you have to be absolutely deliberate in everything you do to build cohesion through that cycle. And then you get a couple of injuries and it can all kind of fall all over the place. The only time we've ever looked at the Lions and like, we don't know what they're doing was 05. If you look back at that retrospectively, it's like, it just seemed all over the shop. And then they lost round 1 at the game 1, this first test. And then they made like 8 changes after the second one. It's like, okay, you're just throwing darts in the air now.
Yeah.
Right? But interestingly, the most experienced team of all time that we've ever found, as in most games of rugby played, was the 05 Lions against the All Blacks.
And in terms of number of caps individually?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So if you have cohesion and experience, fantastic. That's exactly what you want. So Springboks now have cohesion and experience. They broke the record last World Cup for the most cohesive team we've ever seen. If you have experience and no cohesion, you have a lot of different people with different ideas on how you should play, trying to figure it out with each other, and it not necessarily working. And that's 05.
Yeah, if you do E plus C squared, so I'm trying to do a formula here, and you look at the box, then you have basically in 2015 a semifinal in which on the field against the best All Blacks ever, there were a bunch of 21 and 22 and 20-year-old Boks, and they are Jesse Creel, Damien Diolende, Andre Pollard, Eben Etzebeth, Lua de Jager, Sia Khaleesi in the squad, Peter Stittor in the squad, and Dwayne Vermeulen. That is ridiculous that they're still, Dwayne is coaching now, but 10 of those 15, nailed on core spine players were picked by Heineke Meyer and inherited by Rassie Erasmus through Alistair Coetzee. So that just doesn't really happen very often. And, when I look at this Lions team, I think what they could do, I think you're right about the Irish thing, but also in the back line, they could do Russell, Sione Tuipulotu, Hugh Jones with Blair Kinghorn in the back. And they've got basically a Scottish, a very good attacking Scottish cadre with the addition of Jamison Gibson Park and James Lowe. And then in the forward pack, you could have sort of the same idea, but from reverse. It could be an Irish pack, but you have a Genge coming in to scrum maybe better, or you have Maro Toje. So I think they could go there. Maybe Andy Farrell knows that all along, and he's just trying to see, do I have a lucky card somewhere? Who can stand up? And then of course Elliot Daly breaks his arm, and a lot of your planning goes out the window because Hugo Keenan hasn't come back.
That's the big that's the big worry out of the Reds game, isn't it? He was so good. He was really good. He was really good. That was I saw a social media post. That was the 11th straight Lions match day 23 that Elliot Daly had been in.
Wow. That's crazy. And not always a regular starter for England, but when Lions comes around, he's like a major golf guy, like I only play well in the majors, he just comes up.
Yeah, I should be right by
El Cabrera or someone.
Yeah. How Ben does so for all these pieces and all the the Irish model here and the Scottish here and the English backup and all that, I think about someone like Jack Morgan, who was absolutely fantastic against Queensland. He came off the bench on Saturday night in Perth, and he looks very, very happy to be there on the tour. Absolutely deserves his spot, but he looks like he could just sort of tack on to whatever system Andy Farrell wants to put together, and he'll just do a job.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really interesting about the certain positions that guys play and what the ones that can almost act in isolation and the ones that can act in that absolutely need cohesion, right?
Yeah.
And so where you actually need it, you might call the team spine, which will be 2, 4, 5, 9, 10, 12, 13, basically. Yeah. And then you've got these other parts that can kind of function around, and then fullback will tend to come into that in terms of attack. But the other parts can be pushed in and pushed out.
Interchangeable.
And we've particularly found like back rowers can change clubs, change teams. They basically just have a roving commission. They're not even sitting in the defensive line a lot of the time. Like a George Smith, when he went to Wasps, was just incredible. They could just jump in to the defensive line wherever they want and then come back out again. Eights tend to be the same way. And so it's quite interesting. If you look at teams when they first start, like the Rebels, for example, Lockie Mitchell was the best player on the field generally for us. Wingers, prop will do well. My club North, which is generally not a cohesive club, basically only produced props for Australia for about 5 years. We just didn't seem to produce players of other positions. Whereas the understanding was required in the areas that require clubs almost that bring understanding to the table, right? So you think about the greatest centre pairings of all time, Darcy O'Driscoll, Nonu Smith. Think about Nonu away from the Hurricanes, when he's at the Highlanders, or is it Blues, or is it Rico? People saying he didn't care about Super Rugby, only cared about the All Blacks. Plays with Conrad Smith, all of a sudden is like a different player. So there are certain players that you look at in isolation, and there are certain players you can look at in the collective, and the collective will have a much greater impact on their performance.
Yeah.
Also, my understanding is and I think this is true of Ireland, this is what I've heard at least when I was at Munster, is a lot of coaches now are picking their team, imagining what will be on the field at the end. And when that's true, Jack Morgan is a guy, he can play any of those three positions. So he rises a little bit maybe over a Curry or Ben Earl for sure, because Jack Morgan can definitely play 6, 7, 8. He doesn't look like he can, and then he goes on the field and he does. I don't know how he can. His power per pound is amazing.
I think what's really interesting is when I was at in Japan, I was at NTT, and we were going up into the top league, and we were never going to win games. We just weren't possible. And we were talking about how can we get enough points to stay up? Well, we're going to have to do it through bonus points. So why not just try to grab 3 or 4 tries in the last 20 minutes when we're down by a lot, and against when they put on their reserves? Right. We know that they're not going to be as strong. And so basically exceed victory but go for the bonus points, which is not the case obviously in a test scenario. But 100% is because it's cohesion analytics in many ways is about the resources you have against the resources they have, and then that's going to change in the context of the game. What you saw in the last, in the Force game and the Reds game was they both dropped off dramatically towards the back end because the Wallabies are not there, and the you've got test players now against guys who are semi-Super Rugby players. And obviously they had to bring guys back. So they had to bring guys to New Zealand, obviously, for the Reds, and they had to bring Ollie back from the UK. But they drop away dramatically at that period of time. And that's a really big thing. And one of the clubs we work with in the UK, what we were working on them with was, okay, we know your starting 15 is the best built in the country. How many injuries can you take and still win? And on this occasion, they had 3 injuries, or 3 guys out the week of the final, and still had a good enough team. And that's where the Lions really struggle, is they have no redundancy. Like if they make a change and a Welsh guy comes in, well, the one Welsh guy comes in, or they make a change and a Scottish guy comes in, their numbers will drop away terribly, and that's how the Lions can get so derailed.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how then? How other than the addition of time, how do you actually build cohesion into the right areas over the course of a tour? Like, can you even? You can't do that in a training field. So what can you do?
Okay, so one of the things we found that was interesting was when COVID hit. Someone actually asked me this on Twitter before.
Oh, on the socials, I saw you.
This. When COVID hit, the 2 teams who started to overperform were the teams who had to stay in hotels, and everyone else was doing the normal travel, and one of them was the Warriors, and he was saying training would finish and the players normally would go home, or their girlfriends would come pick them up and they leave. When they're here, they just stay on the field and they keep going, right? The Brumbies, we lived together, and I remember I'd be at dinner with the guys, and Desi Tuivai, if you remember Desi Tuivai, we used to put the plays up on the wall and just start talking about it all the time. So these sort of incidental conversations. One of the things I remember seeing from one of the Lions tours was they started a choir together, and one of the players was like, "This is not helping. We just got to do lineouts," right? so absolutely, training can help. The problem is the travel you whack onto them. I mean, my theory is that the reason they want the Wallabies to come back and play is because they don't want the Wallabies training together. Right?
That's an interesting concept.
It's just an idea.
But to be fair, the Lions have done well in Australia over the years. And they've done better in Australia than the independent constituent parts of their team have done. I've always followed a theory that, yes, I understand all what you said, but at a certain level, when you have the best of the best from these 4 countries, when they come into camp, they must just kill themselves to beat each other. And there's got to be a rising of game when you have a star, a real star, looking at another star. I'm Irish, you're English. Oh, it's on. The internal, capacity for competition between the Irish and English players, just taking 2, for example, but probably Scottish and English too. It's got to bring out the best in them. It's that weird love-hate, iron sharpens iron. It's like at representative levels. You get there, you're the best one in your school. There's a guy over there, and you suddenly go, "Ooh, I've got to bring out everything," because I just don't know. I don't know if I'm Jack Morgan. I don't know if Tom Curry's better than me, and so I've always wondered if that was part of it. The other one is that I think you're right. The tour itself, old-fashioned, we're together, get silly, get crazy, get drunk. It has to work after all that competition. It has to work to get together. And the best Lions teams have been ferocious. They die for each other, even though 6 weeks ago they probably didn't even like each other that much.
And that's what I wondered, Ben. Could you? Is it through something as simple as your room pairings? Do you stick Jamison Gibson Park and Finn Russell?
Do we know that? Do we know what the room pairing is? That's interesting.
Well, so Duhan Vandermerwe, speaking to Stan Sport in Australia after the Queensland game, admitted that he thinks he's been stitched up because he's been paired with Henry Pollock for 2 weeks. Everyone else has been changing, but he's been copying Henry Pollock for 2 weeks. And that was interesting to me because I thought, why wouldn't he be with Elliot Daly, or why wouldn't he be with James Lowe or someone like that who he doesn't know, who he then can start building a bit of rapport and building a bit of dare I say, cohesion with it? Like, is that one way that you can sort of instill a little bit off the field?
Any conversation you have about how you want to play is going to help understanding between the two parts, right?
Yeah.
I would say that if we take, Harry, this notion of, okay, well, the Lions are the best of the best, the easiest way to describe it, what we find is that basically skill times cohesion equals capacity. So you have an amount of skill and then you have an amount of cohesion.
Like a huge skill, but they lack. Yeah.
Right. And so the Lions, in terms of, they're probably the most underperforming team if you just take their caps.
Oh, right? I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have to get as cohesive as they possibly can, but because they have so much skill, they don't have to be better than you. They just have to be close enough to win it.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe they have to get to 75% of what the opposition might be. But that also depends upon the quality of the team. Now, generally, the team they play against is the most recent world champion, and that team might be reloading a little bit. For example, 2001, we were starting to reload. The Reds were coming out. The Brumbies were coming in. If you look at 2009, post this, the 7 World Cup with the Box, they were reloading a little bit. And so there's this kind of really interesting timelines. I mean, 21 was the most interesting because the Box hadn't played in a year and a half, basically at all. So that was, but the worst team they've ever fielded was the 13 team, from a cohesion perspective, was the 13 team that lost to the Brumbies. Which I don't really like to bring up because then it sort of belittles it a little bit, right?
And that was a perfect storm, wasn't it? Because they literally had blokes flying in a couple of days beforehand just to play that game
from Japan. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So the Lions is fundamentally talent trying to get some cohesion against a country that theoretically should have more, who themselves are off a short run in. But the problem is that Australian rugby itself has been in a level of chaos, right?
Yeah.
For the past 2 to 3 years. The team that Eddie had is not the team that Schmidt had, and it's not the team the previous coach had. And so there's been a lot of what we would call like wasted games, a lot of games played by people who are not going to be playing now. And the Lions can't afford to have any wasted games. They have to use every game they can in this period of time. And that's why it has to go so right for them, and why it can go so wrong, like in 2005, and you get an injury to one of your centers in the first game, and everything can fall apart pretty quickly.
They've used 36 of their 38 players already. It would have been 37 if Keenan played in Queensland.
I think only Ryan and maybe
James Ryan come off the bench against Queensland.
Hasn't started a game, but everyone else has had one start except for him, and then White obviously being flown in.
Kinghorn and Keenan are the only ones yet to play.
Gentlemen, my worry is it looks like the Lions are ultra fit this time. I mean, really fit. And I know they have some incredible fitness gurus in their camp, and they just don't look tired at all. At 80 minutes, they are ready to play on. And they look shredded, they look cut, they look right for their position. Even the props looking very mobile. Yeah, I'm just hoping Joe's got enough going on in the fitness camp.
It's a fair question. You talk a bit of that last moment where Toja says, "No, I don't care. It's the 82nd."
They were happy. They weren't even breathing hard.
The Reds forwards went.
So really interesting stuff on this. So, under stress, under fatigue, we revert. Right, we revert to how we've done things previously. Okay, and so one thing with England, for example, England in the last 30 minutes give away more points than anyone else in the world because they sort of revert back to their club. The problem with England is they're all coming from different clubs, right? So what you have to do with the Lions, and generally with what we would call high experience, low cohesion teams, is get them fatigued so they start to revert back to how they've done it previously, because you can't build habits like in 4 weeks. And I remember talking to Lottie Takiri about when he talked about the cognitive load. He didn't use the words cognitive load, but we're talking about how hard it was him to remember not to do the things he did in rugby league. So he's going back to his own trial. I wants to scoop the ball up, right? So when you're not fatigued, you're comfortable to remember the things. When you're absolutely gassed, you can't think, and you'll just go to the habits you have. So when we look at, we did this in rugby league and rugby union, and we looked at high cohesion teams and high experience teams. We looked at high experience teams that have no cohesion, right? We looked at low and low on both, and then we looked at high cohesion, low experience. So a good example is Scotland beat Australia a couple of years ago with the least test caps, one of the lowest test caps they'd ever had, but they had a lot of cohesion because they had Glasgow, right? So they weren't an experienced team, but they had a lot of shared experience. Yeah. Panthers 3 years ago won the NRL with the second youngest team in the comp, right? So now when we looked at those teams, the high experience teams, which you might call also very high skill, that had low cohesion, when they played against poor teams, they put bigger scores on them than the high cohesion, high experience. So that they would, so like the Lions are putting big scores on people now, right? So because they have so much talent, they can score points. And generally in rugby, individual talent can score you tries. So when the Rebels first started, we had no problem attacking. We had Cipriani. Yep. We could get people to score. We just couldn't defend to save our lives, right?
Yeah.
And but when you put high cohesion and high experience against that team, they tend to crumble and they'll lose 12-0, 14-0, 16-0. They just get, we call it like they just get blanked. So you have to put fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is that you have to put the Lions under pressure so they revert, right? You have to put pressure on the relationships. If they're comfortable and they're as fit as you guys say, they have to be put under large amounts of pressure to break them. Otherwise, they'll just tear us apart. Okay. Yeah. Now, we don't have a high cohesion team. Australia right now isn't. We don't have a high experience team. So we're going to have to find a way to do things to them, to make them do things they don't want to do, and hopefully crumble under pressure. But it's really interesting that those teams will actually put bigger scores on the poor teams because they have so much. And there's a turn of phrase people have for that: flat track bully. Right? Yeah. There's a reason why that is a phrase, I think.
Yeah.
And so that will be. I hope we can find ways to put pressure on them, because right now they're under no pressure and they're all remembering the things they need to do.
Yeah.
But there's such a history in English sport of English teams because of their nature is like they look impossibly good. Like even 03 World Cup, right? You know, like they're looking impossibly good. Then they play Samoa and Samoa put like 3 tries on them. Yeah. They just put them under pressure, or the final, you know, we almost jagged it and pulled it off. So they always have that underbelly, not a soft underbelly because it's not about character, but an underbelly that they can be broken. Whether we're capable of doing that, I don't know.
Yeah, so I've obviously read a lot about your the findings, the TWI, proprietary secrets behind it all. I don't know what they are. And so my theories, I've wondered about this is a game is a game just a game is a game, or is there variations, gradations of experience? So if I did a graph where I said all the knockout Rugby World Cup knockout games you've been in doesn't really like wash everything else away. And it was so obvious that it would be Springboks All Blacks in 2023 for me, because I thought there's just something very different about experiencing a knockout in a Rugby World Cup versus you played 17 end of year tour together and June tests. Does that make sense?
The hard part is that both their numbers are better. You know what I mean? Like the hard part is their numbers were both extraordinary. And
true, right.
Yeah. So it's hard to be able to tell, but I'm sure the notion of playing in knockout games can help, but it's extremely difficult to be able to draw an objective comparison. Yeah. And so what data do we have objectively? Well, we don't. You know, someone was asking about culture before. There's no data for culture.
No, you can't measure that.
But the one thing I know is that that when teams win, the bad news comes out later. In other words, the bad behavior doesn't get revealed because the town they're in or the city they're in generally protects their behavior. So All Blacks, you know, everyone talks about legacy and stuff, but realistically, they're just as badly behaved as everyone else. When teams are losing, the bad behavior comes out the next day in the paper.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah.
So that's really hard. And then we also tend to gloss the scenarios where teams will do things and they win retrospectively. And we'll go, that guy is a genius. That coach is a genius. And yet everyone's doing the same stuff, right? Every time I've ever been a part of, is all setting the goals. They're all doing the stuff on the wall. They're all doing that part. But then when teams win, we go, oh, look what they did. And we kind of retrospectively see that.
Well, there's two things that I was thinking about that formed this hypothesis I've got, and have nothing to back it up, Ben, sorry. But one is crunch stats in the NBA, where if you take a certain part of the game, final 2 minutes with the score, less than 5 point margin, some players' shooting percentage goes up, most players' percentage goes down. They don't want the ball in the pressure moments, and so you can measure it in that kind of game because it's shot clock is different. The other one is in many sports, to get over the hump, to get the major, to finally win the Masters, to finally get to Wimbledon. They always say, the players say, now that I've got there, it's easier. Like the next time I'm there, it's gonna be easier.
Which is interesting because they say the second grand final is harder to win than the first. Because the whole notion of being defending champions and all that. But I agree with what you're saying because
in
you've
team
done
sports, though, like in the NBA, it seems like you get to the semifinals conference, then you get to the conference finals, and finally you get to the final, and then it seems like you can do it again. Is it? I mean, am I way off, Ben, on that?
I think that there is teams who've lost until they've won. And there's teams who've lost and then never gotten there. I think of the NFL. I think Denver lost a couple and then won a Super Bowl, whereas Buffalo Bills, I think, lost 4 in a row.
The famous losers.
The Chiefs have lost 3 Super Rugby finals on the top now.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Right. I think we all want to find patterns, all of us, all the time, and that's the biggest danger with our work is like hubris, right? Is like just thinking I'm right about everything all the time, and it's like, well, it can't necessarily be the case. But I think you could find lots of examples of both sides of that occasion. But here's the thing, right? Is I know in my experience that if you've won finals before, you take the field being comfortable that you can do it. There's other times, for example, when I was at the Brumbies, there was kind of this feeling like, as we won a final, lost a final, lost a semi-final, that we were kind of on this way down, right? It's like something's not right. We're not winning games we used to win, and so there is times when you're like, well, that was luck, or players can convince themselves of lots of different things on the way. But like in 2004, we then won it again, right? When I wasn't playing, but they were able to turn it around. We are not measuring the nature of the shared experience. We are just measuring the shared experience, whether they have played together.
But that could come at any point, right? At high school, varsity.
Yeah. So, but early seems to be important. As in, Harry, if you were the first hooker I ever played with, I would never forget how to scrummage with you, and I can always go back to that, right? Like I have that with Jeremy Paul. I still remember how to scrummage with Jeremy Paul 20 years later. And so there's definitely some components of this. And cohesion, in a way, is not about 300 games together. It's getting rid of the first 10 together as well. It's like, because your 300th game together doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And so that's
team returns. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what he's got in a lot of those. What we see with the Lions at the moment is they're patchy. They've got amazing cohesion in different parts. And the good part for Farrell is like he knows that's always there. He can always go back to that, and they'll just bang straight off the bat. They probably just need one game together. It's the other bits. That's what he has to work on.
Yeah. So in terms of your measurements, Ben, and I don't want you to give up trade secrets or anything like that, but for the purposes of your analysis and the way you measure cohesion, is one game just one game, or is a victory in a World Cup final worth more than a win in round 3 of the Premiership or whatever?
No, a game is a game is a game.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and what we've done is when we first started, we looked at TWI, which was like fundamentally the perspective of the club. Are they a build or are they a buy, right? And then we found clubs who absolutely did not follow that model. So there's an example in English netball where Wasps started a new rugby club, a new netball club, and they took the entire team who'd won the year before and imported them to Wasps, and they won the comp as Wasps. So they had no internal recruitment whatsoever, right? But they had lots of games together. They had a ton of games together. So then we started to go, okay, well, TWI therefore is not always necessarily reflective of success. And then we started doing that, and then we're like, oh, but if you've got 10 guys in a team who've all played together and 5 haven't, that seems to completely ruin it, right? So then we're like, okay, so let's look at the evenness of it. And then we were like, well, it doesn't really seem to matter between a prop and a winger. It seems to matter between a 9 and a 10 or a 10 and a 12. So then you start to lean it in certain directions. So you can see, and then it was like, well, how much does recency count? Okay, how much does time together this season? So then you get that timelining issue. And so it just flows on and on and on to different parts. And then one, for example, I don't know if you remember the Chicago Ireland game. I mean, one of the great contributors towards that was Kano was not 6, he was 5. Right. So now he doesn't know how to scrummage at right side lock. I think Tui Tupuletu's having a baby, right? So their line-out's gone, their scrum's gone, their defensive line-out is gone. He's just doing all the things he would generally do at 6. Bergamasco, do you guys remember Bergamasco playing at 9?
Italian,
Okay, so then that's when the positional part starts to come, all right? Now, some sports, like the AFL, for example, positional change is not that definitive. Or football's the same, right? Because you can have a defensive midfielder. So what we try to do is to suck up everything we can from all the different sports. With rugby league, it's about geography: left edge, right edge, third last defender, second last defender. Positions is not so much about that. It's about like as a centre, how many times have I played in the side with these guys before, for example? So
So is that more to do? Sorry. So is that more to do with the evolution of those? So you mentioned AFL there before. There really is no full forwards and wingmen and back pockets or anything like that now. You basically got a couple of forwards, a couple of backs, and everyone else is a midfielder. Even rugby league is basically becoming carriers and halves essentially. So with that left edge, right edge part that you talk about.
Yeah. So here's my question for you, Harry. Do you think rugby will go that way? Eddie Jones talks about it a lot.
Yeah,
is like hybrid players playing hybrid positions.
Yeah. So it depends on whether the sanctity, whatever, of the set piece remains, where you scrum to penalty, where lineouts are like non-negotiables. I mean, if you lose 5 lineouts, it's almost worse than if you lose 5. If 5 scrum penalties against you and 5 lineouts are lost, it's almost as bad as giving up. It's better. It's worse than getting 5 line breaks against you. It's worse than getting 5 charge downs. It's amazingly bad because you get entries and exits for free. So as long as those core principles stay, then I think it's harder to homogenize everyone and everyone turns into Artie Surveyor. I do think along the loose forwards and 12-13, there's been some showing that they are both getting over the ball as much. They both make similar impact tackles, collisions. And so you look at Ben Earls floating now to 12. Springboks on purpose are naming Andre Esterhazen as a flank. So I think, that's coming.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's ever going to be able to be unspecialized as much.
I can certainly see a point, Ben, where we start playing left and right centers in attack. I think we're even seeing elements of that now.
I think Argentina does that already. And France sometimes,
If you look at early rugby league, statistically doesn't work anything like the rugby league now. So it's definitely evolved as a game. For example, the hooker playing the dummy half role, it just wasn't as important previously. Or, it used to be wingers throwing in the line-out, right? Because part of the reason why 2 forward, 5, 6 relationships are so important is because they need understanding for the line-out. So you can't just take all data for the entire history of the game. Although we mapped 1897 AFL to today, and it's pretty good, but it's got all the bigger things. But then when you start to get into this kind of specialization, you get smaller data sets. One, because the quality of the data is not as good, so you don't get who comes on from the bench prior to sort of 2000 in terms of how long they're on the field. So therefore, we can only look at games from 2010 onwards because we need 10 years of data to look at a game. But what will be interesting is as the patterns of the games change. Right. Is that the areas that will be important will change, right?
True.
Or for example, if they can find ways to teach players to work together faster through whatever means it might be. And I know the Springboks have those sort of camps, right? And one of the things they have is those they all get a PlayStation controller and they control themselves on the screen. He's basically trying to build cohesion without going on the field, right? Because he doesn't have the time or the wherewithal. That would absolutely help in terms of then when you go onto the field. So if they can find ways to do that, what we may see is teams getting more competitive with less games played between them.
Yeah. And Benny, I think on the shape of the game, so obviously there's things we don't know 25 years out, but aerial and diagonal aerial, I think, is on the rise. So if you had 5 Joseph Akoso Suali'is in your team, and your fly off and scrum off were both sort of like quarterbacks, and they could not just kick a loopy cross kick, but I'm talking a spirally kick that goes right where it's supposed to go, quadrant like an NFL quarterback throwing an out pattern. That is coming off. It's happening more and more. You can see it more and more with a skilled 10 and a Freeman. Russell to Freeman is a danger, but so is Suali'i. And if you can pack your back line like that, rugby looks a lot different suddenly, and you have to have different kind of athletes.
What I find too interesting is having a look at how good Nwanga Tiawase is doing, but also the things he's having trouble with. Right, he's having trouble. League, he's having trouble with the high ball. He's having trouble with his defending, which would make sense. But he's absolutely outstanding at finishing, as good as anyone in the game. And so it's part of our research is like when things fail. One of the great pieces of footage we use is Hugh Jones's first game for Scotland, and England put like 60 on them, and they went in and outside Hugh Jones all day. and Jamie Joseph got man of the match, right? Because he looked incredible, and he was absolutely awful. No offense to him. And I remember talking to the Scottish guys, and they said, like, our defensive coach has nightmares about that day. A year later, they play against England at Murrayfield, and Hugh Jones had gone off and played a little bit with Glasgow and built understanding of the group. He gets man of the match a year later, right? Yeah. It's like Hugh Jones in that first game was nothing like Hugh Jones a year later, and now here he is, doing absolutely magnificently. So one of the things we talk about quite a bit is if you don't understand the context for the player, it's extremely difficult to understand the context of their performance. So that's attribution bias. We overly attribute a failure or success to them. And I was actually talking to Justin Harrison about this last week. When I was at the Wallabies, I was asked to go back to play for the Brumbies, and I was in my head was all of the systems, right? And an interesting thing is Leinster have actually said to us when the Leinster guys come back, they have to get the island out of them, whatever that means, right? Yeah. So I came back, and Good calls the first line out, and I blanch. I don't know what to do. Because in my head, I'm listening for something that doesn't come, and I turn to him, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'd run to the front. He's like, "What are you doing?" And then I just panicked more and more and more. It's the worst game I've ever played by a country mile. And he was like his last game for the Brumbies. He thought it was his last game, so he's just getting angrier and angrier. And I just couldn't recall what I was supposed to remember, right? Yeah. And when low cohesion teams get described in the press, or when they get described by their coaches, they'll say they have no pride in the jersey. I just want players who have passion. They're not trying because when you're feeling unsure, you panic and you either fight or you flight, you run, or you freeze, right? You freeze, and you cannot get your body to move in the same way as when you're completely confident about what you're going to do, but also what your teammate's going to do. And I liken it to like you're just about to do an exam in French, Brett, and just before you enter, they say, "By the way, it's a German." You're like, okay. Yeah. Now what do I do? Yeah.
Yeah, great.
That's why we all have dreams about that, except we're naked in our dreams at the same time. That's unpreparedness.
After I had my injury, I had the same dream about 20 times where I was going back out to play for Australia. Okay. And I was like in the tunnel, and I was like, I don't know if I could play. My mum won't let me play because I got injured. And then just as I'm about to play. Yeah, and then just as I'm about to go out, Al Baxter grabs me by the hand and say it's okay, and then he goes out and plays.
Al Baxter.
I had that dream like 10 times. It's like,
wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Completely different subject.
But so all the British and Irish Lions routinely face what we'll call blitz defenses, rush defenses, highline defenses, swinging umbrella defenses. And the Australian teams, there's not really a rush defense system at play in the Australian conference, I'll call it right now. I think 2 New Zealand teams kind of do, and 2 New Zealand teams also play a lot of blindside and do the Irish attack where you have the middle ruck and you have 2-sided attacks. But for the most part, there's sort of, you have a whole season of playing this way and you have a whole season of playing that way. And so even though the Lions are not cohesive yet in that, they all rush up. And you could see the effect on the Reds and the Force. I know it's a small sample size, but it's panicky. It's havoc when you are not used to, 1 second less. It's ridiculous, actually.
Yeah.
Whenever you have to face a scenario you haven't faced before, there is a panic. There's actually some. Just give me 1 second, Simon. Who's the footage of the centre who played for the Waratahs?
Jamie Roberts.
Sorry. So we've got this great footage of Jamie Roberts when he came to the Tars, right? And it's his first time on the field, and he blitzes hard defensively, and no one goes with him.
Yeah.
And they step around him and they go through the gap that he just created.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it was we see that happen all the time. That sometimes it's not that he was doing anything wrong; it's he was doing the right thing for Wales.
Yeah,
but he happened to be playing for New South Wales.
Right? Playing for New South Wales at the time.
And that's when you get chaos, is you get everyone doing what they think is the right thing, but they just don't happen to be on the same page as one another, right? So and I think too, Harry, one thing that's really interesting is we don't, we only now play the New Zealand teams. We don't play the South African teams. Like I know we had to adjust at different times of the year in terms of like how many guys we put into the breakdown, for example, and who we had to target or where we wanted to play. And it would take a couple of games to kind of get used to that and to adjust. We don't have to make that adjustment anymore in Super Rugby as much as we used to. And so as I think with Europe, those guys, they're playing amongst lots of different environments all the time.
They're adjusting all the time.
Yeah, adjusting all the time, which means they probably don't get to play continuously the same way. They're not as embedded in playing the same way with each other as much, but they do have that ability to adjust.
Fascinating matchup, isn't it?
It's really fascinating. But as always, and as we often know, and as we often find when we end up having social media reactions and conversations and all that, we could absolutely go on for hours here. Conscious that you've got an office behind you that still needs to function, conscious that we've got things to do here as well. Let's put a pin in it. Let's try and pick it up again. Maybe back into the Lions series, Harry. If you happen to get out to Australia for it, we'll try and try and fix something.
Let's see what happens.
See what we can do. See what we can revisit. But Ben, this has been a absolutely fascinating chat. We really appreciate you giving up some time for us this week.
Awesome, and I just, because you guys think about the game so differently, and particularly yourself, Harry, I think it's just important we just keep questioning everything, right? Like what is working, what is not working, what is an attribution, what is a false attribution. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can kind of start to really understand what's happening. And I'm looking forward to the series. If only, I think it could be a good step for Australian rugby. And I think if we get blanked, it's a hard one. It won't be a complete disaster, but if the Lions don't win, no one really cares. Like, I know that sounds terrible, but like no one's that attached to the Lions. It's like they're there and they're fantastic. Can I tell a quick story, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was doing I was an MC on Saturday night in Perth, and Yayan Evans came along, and just one of my heroes as a kid, and he's we're in this corporate box or something like that, and just at the end of my presentation, he was so lovely, and he's knighted, and he's got such a great history, and he's actually he's the tour leader for the Lions, or the governor of the Lions,
tour manager or something like that. Yeah.
And I said, I just want you to know, my mum thinks you've got great legs. And he said, well, your mum has fantastic tits.
Nice.
What?
Boom.
And so the whole room went quiet, and I'm like, what?
How do you know that?
Yayan, did you say my mum has fantastic taste? Yes. And it was his Welsh accent. None of us could understand that he said your mum's got fantastic taste. So we rescued that situation. The poor bloke, I almost, was about to hit him. And like, how dare you say that about my mum? It's like, oh, she's got great taste. Oh, okay. Thank you. Lovely. Anyway.
And that's why there's only one Welshman in the tour.
Yes, no one understands it.
Indeed. Thanks so much, mate. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
This is the 8-9 combo with Brett McKay and Harry Jones. And, mate, great to have Ben Darwin back on the 8-9. That was a meaty, substantive, quantitative, highly measurable chat. That was really, really enjoyable. Fascinating even.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always a measure of our best chats when we kind of leave the outlines behind and we just actually listening in the moment, letting the great man think his way through. Also, one piece of evidence that, front rowers are the smartest guys in rugby. I don't know how it's so obvious. It's so weird because the guys who have to play all the smart positions in rugby are usually kind of fools. These blockheads in the front, they are just unbelievable.
Yeah. It's a good point you make. We even came in with, maybe only 2 or 3 sort of general themes. We used the first one.
Yeah, true.
It just all went from there.
Got to the second one.
It just all went from there. So we'll be back with the weekend post-mortem, which this weekend includes the Wallabies Fiji in Newcastle, which Joe Schmidt will be hoping gives him as many selection headaches as Andy Farrell currently has. And make sure you're subscribed as well so that you don't miss the next edition of the 8-9 Tap and Go. Properly exclusive to the 8-9 YouTube, as I mentioned. Out next Tuesday. Short, sharp, completely unscripted. What could possibly go wrong, mate?
I'm enjoying it.
We are. Games of the week. I think we can wrap through this all pretty quickly, mate. There's a bucket load of international rugby suddenly on this weekend. That graphic doesn't do justice to it all. In fact, the Māori All Blacks play Scotland in Whanganui on Saturday. Japan, Wales in Fukuoka. New Zealand, France in Dunedin. The Waratahs playing the British and Irish Lions in Sydney. South Africa playing Italy in Pretoria. Georgia are playing Ireland in Tbilisi. Argentina playing England in La Plata. Chile are playing Romania. The USA are playing Belgium. And then on Sunday, it's Australia, Fiji in Newcastle.
Test rugby.
We will not be doing reactions after all of those matches.
I'll be reacting to the box, I'm sure, but
you will be.
I'm really interested in what happens with New Zealand France because New Zealand All Blacks may have put themselves up for a mighty banana skin here because it's been like, this is shameful, embarrassing. What if they struggle? Or
what if they? Yes, I
the worst
agree
thing
with
happens?
you.
Yeah.
And that is always the danger of wheeling the soapbox out, isn't it?
All Blacks start slow. They always have. They end great.
Yeah.
They get better with every game, but they often start slow.
They often start slow, which is interesting, as you said at the top, that they've gone big to start with. They've just gone, all right.
I like the team.
We're
I
picking
really,
the top
really
team
like the team. Yeah.
Matt Proctor at Billy Proctor. Sorry, Matt Proctor. Billy Proctor at 13 is a great selection.
Holland at the
He's
lock.
had such a good season.
They've really sized up at 6 now, which is nice.
Yep, agree. The Harry Index wrapped up.
That was it.
2024-25, essentially. So finished with Toulouse, Bordeaux, Leinster, Bath, Toulon, the Crusaders, Chiefs, Leicester, Bayonne, and the Bulls rounded up.
Yeah, I think you could see the French influence there. That had Bordeaux hung on, of course, they would have retained number 1. And probably Toulouse would have stayed where they were before. But I think they had to rise. And in the end, the feat of winning the top 14 is just bigger than winning the Champions Cup in this particular vintage of it because of the Saints, what the Saints did to kind of upset it all. And I just felt like that was a monumental achievement as well to then come back and beat Bordeaux.
Yeah.
The other thing is the French depth, I think, showed, and so it kind of moved some other, like the Urk and Super Rugby had to kind of shift down a little bit. Listen, they just head and shoulders as a club competition. That's all I'm talking about now. Top 14 is head and shoulders above. The money does end up telling, and the fact that so much of Argentina is playing there, so much of the Pacific Islands. It's
more and more of Scotland and Wales is playing there.
Yes, top player like Jack Willis, but it just we don't have the same thing in our competitions. We're not having the best of 5 other countries coming to play. So the best of as well.
Yeah,
so,
it would have been interesting had Bordeaux won it. It would have been interesting to say to them, righto, rank them top 14 Champions Cup.
Yeah, because then you'd have a clear. So the top 14, I thought, had the closest top 2 in that there's just not a hair's breadth of difference. It took extra time because Bordeaux has risen now, and then with Toulouse maybe taking one step back with Dupont out, and whereas there was, I guess, across the other leagues there really was a top dog.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
And I also think on the 3rd and 4th, Toulon was a handful. It would be a handful for any club to beat.
Yeah, but it never really felt like, and we certainly never spoke in terms of they could win this.
They're not exciting.
Like they were a
hard to
handful,
beat.
but they were just yeah. That's probably what it comes down to.
So the 3rd team is really hard to beat. You compare all the 3rd teams, and you go, "Ooh, yeah, that depth is really strong."
Yeah, that's fair, and that's where the magic of the index. So you keep telling me. That then I think, mate, is another great episode of the 8-9 Combo behind us. And our sincere thanks to Ben Darwin for giving us some time. It's a busy time for everyone in rugby right now, and we absolutely appreciate him giving us opportunity. So tell us what you think by following Harry and I on the socials in our usual places, at Harry Baldy Jones, at BMC Sport. You can find the 8-9 Combo on the socials or on YouTube. You can have your say as well. You can leave a comment on Spotify. We'd love to hear from you wherever you get in touch. So do that. We like shares. We love ratings. We love reviews wherever you can as well. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed in a rugby podcast. Sean Maloney is ready to wrap it all up. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones, and we will be back in your ears in a few days' time for the next Lions Tour edition of the Weekend Post-Mortem.
Come play with us.
Here goes Jones with another bruising run. He links up with McKay, who pops back to Jones. They can't. They won't. They will. What a try. The Dream Team Combo go in again.